business stuff all done today. It's 100% about music. A lot of people have been asking me since I played you my song before and after mixing how I got it so wide. We'll talk about that, but please today bear a little with me. I'm tired. I spent the entire night learning more. As you know, I'm doing this course right now, HOFA. It's like a German company. They offer in German and English like courses for music production. It's for beginners, it's for pros. Everyone can learn something. And they also have what I didn't know, like you can call them and have like support kind of, and they will help you answer questions. And on top of the courses, they have classes, live streams that you can check out, and you get discounts for certain companies if you're part of their program. So I of course bought a little more gear. It will arrive maybe tonight. I'll definitely share it. If you're interested, like in the description are the links for the German and English courses. Just go check it out for yourself. If you're interested to learn, that's at least what I'm personally using right now to just educate myself a little more during these weird COVID kind of times. And next up, actually really quick, some adjustments here in the studio. It's like still a couple percent under construction, not 100% finished. There are small details I want to fix, and then music 100%.
I'll rise up from the ground like the phoenix. Shake away the embers of my feelings.
That took again way longer than expected, but now it's time for music. And like the stereo width, I think, is something very, very important, especially for modern music. Like making it wide and big, it just sounds a lot more epic. There are also some drawbacks, some problems. I'll try and explain everything, but let's actually start with like a tiny bit of theory. So this right here is the project of my song Watch Me Burn. It's complete, kind of. There's still some tweaks maybe here and there, but it's ready for release actually. And I think it's like a good example because I took it from like sounding very, very tiny to something that sounds really big. I'll play you the example of the mixing before and after in the outro, but now let's focus on the widening stuff, making things bigger. And I think right here the clap is a good example to show you and explain you how it actually works. Let me open up the sample delay. At the same time also span. So that's the clap. It sounds pretty mono. There's like a little like a tail reverb that is a little wider, but it's pretty centered. You can see it with the correlation meter. That's the most important tool when it comes to stereo. When it says 1, something is mono. It's pretty much mono. What you hear is the reverb that is on top that gives it already a little widening. So reverbs can help, but actually what does the trick is the delay. Let's put it to 0 so it doesn't do anything. And now I can start trying to shift it. And I'm shifting because that's what you have to understand. Like left and right, if they play the same thing, it's mono, and it appears to come from the middle of the speakers. Usually kicks, sub bass should be mono just to keep it in check. And other things you can make wide, and you simply do it by delaying one of the channels. That is what widening actually is doing, but you delay it just by so much that your brain can't really figure out that one is coming before the other. It's so close that you can't tell, but still separate, so it starts to sound wide. So let's turn it up a little. You can immediately hear and also see in the correlation meter that it's jumping from 1, which is pretty much mono, to 0, which is pretty much as wide as it gets. The interesting thing is now if you start pushing it further, at this point it's pretty obvious that one clap on one side is coming before the other. You can also see it. They're not hitting at the same time. So that's usually how you widen stuff. I personally always try to find the lowest delay where it starts to sound wide and sits at 0, You can also go into antiphase. That just means that it's even wider, but if you then switch it to mono, it will cancel it out each other, and you will pretty much hear almost nothing. That's something you need to be aware of. But honestly, sometimes if it's necessary, if it's a guitar and I want to separate it from a vocal, I sometimes put it like slightly into antiphase. And yes, you lose a little of the mono compatibility, but if it helps the vocal, I'm fine with that. Making music is always a compromise. If you do one thing, you have to sacrifice something else. If you make kick and bass really loud, then the mid-range and top end suffers. It's just like pulling strings that like stretch back. It's weird. But anyways, that's like how it works. And there are a whole lot of plugins that do widening. There's one that I sometimes like to use by Infected Mushrooms. It's the wider. It's even for free. It basically does the same thing. It goes up to 100, makes it wide. If you go above it, you're in antiphase usually, and you can also make things mono. There's also the S1, is it S1 Imager by Waves? I used to use it and love it back in the days, but right now I think other solutions that are simpler and pure give you a better result. S1 sometimes sounds a little washed out, old school kind of, but basically they all do the same thing. Now the big question is, what should you make wide and what shouldn't you make wide? In general, there are no rules. Like, you can do whatever you want. I sometimes even make the bass really wide if it's necessary and I think it serves a purpose. Usually the very low end of a kick and the very low end of a bass, like the very sub part, just doesn't make any sense to make it stereo. You just lose a lot of energy, a lot of loudness. It sounds really weird, it loses its punch, but everything else you can make wide. A clap, a snare, you can make it wide. You can layer a clap and snare and make one of them wide, one of them mono, and kind of have them like really go throughout the entire stereo spectrum, if that's what you're after. It really also depends on the other elements. Hi-hats, I like to pan rather than make them wide. Then toms, percussions, these kind of things, I usually keep mono. But let me actually play you like an example out of this song. Like the kick is mono, let's start with that. And then the sub bass is also mono. But then the top bass layer is very wide. And I just felt like the song needs it to like capture everything and put it like together, glue it together. Then of course we got some of the arps. They're also really wide. But the vocal sits again more in the middle. And this way you get a nice separation. You put kick and sub bass in the middle. Then on top of that, the top bass, it's up to you. You can keep it mono, a little wide, reverb, no reverb, really wide. That's really a matter of preference. And then above it, your main synthesizer. This really depends if you have vocals or don't have vocals. If it's the main thing, I would make it wide and layer it with something in the middle to make it like extra wide and mono at the same time. And like a wall just hitting your face, especially if it's electronic dance music. Pads, like everything sustained that is more for the mood or atmosphere, wide as much as possible. Hi-hats, again, I pan rather than making them wide, but sometimes also making them wide can sound really nice. For example, if you have like a ride that is going on the entire time, I think at the very end of the song, let's maybe check. Yeah, also with the sample delay, just to spread it out, make it wide and fill up the mix. It's like the very end of the song, the most dense kind of part. So just filling it out with like top frequencies. And what else? Vocals. I personally think the main vocal should be in the middle, but then you have doubles left and right, and this way you thicken it up. And yeah, I mean, sometimes you can also make the vocals really wide. It really depends. But if you have a guitar, make the guitar wide, the vocals in the middle. The other way around would sound really stupid, like the guitar in the middle, the vocals outside. Like the main thing should be in the center and spread out from there. And how much space you give it in the mix is really up to you. And then last but not least, you can also use widening on your master. I would suggest to try and not do it as much as possible. Do it on the individual tracks because you have way more control. But if you have like the feeling everything sits nicely and you want just like a hint more, like make the mix open up and make it wider, then for example here the Better Maker mastering limiter has like a setting where you can just widen it. Isotope, let's see where I got isotope. The imager is just perfect. There's like a white noise playing right now, like a little bit of noise. And it shows you how wide it is. And what's really fascinating about it, you can actually like split it into bands, create a bunch of them, and then decide which band is absolutely mono or which band, why are they linked? Ah, there. And which band you want to make wide. So you can really go in there and make usually like the upper mids and the top end wider and the low end mono. You can also go in here and select, let's say 130, 150 hertz, something like that, and make it mono entirely just to be sure and safe. But again, I prefer to do it on the individual sounds with an MS EQ and just put it into the side mode and then EQ away the low end to 100 hertz, 150. You really have to listen for it and just check out what else is going on in the mix. That's all there is to know about making things wide, thick, and big. Don't forget, sample selection is really important. I think it's the absolute key when it comes to modern music. But anyways, for me, it's now time to like maybe try to squeeze out another 1 or 2% out of the mix of the song, then finally finish it. And then hopefully the gear is arriving. I'm expecting a lot of packages.
I think it will be quite a lot. I received a couple of emails today. How is that?
That's a disappointment. Just one lonely package. Tomorrow. Trust me guys, tomorrow a lot of new gear. Screws for my gear, more cables for the LED, connections for the LEDs, and a new hard drive. Backups, always very important. And last but not least today, like the HOFA program that I'm doing, these courses, like they even offer me to send them a song and get like very detailed feedback. And that's like always exactly what I need whenever I finish, or I'm very close to finishing a song. A song is never really finished, but getting very detailed feedback is very valuable and can help you to improve your song by a lot. Because there are sometimes things that are very obvious that you hear immediately on someone else's track, but would never ever hear on your own track. So getting professional feedback is very important. So I'll send them the song in the newest version, wait a couple of days, and then fix whatever they suggest and hopefully have this way an even better song. Anyways, tomorrow back to the studio, music making. I'll probably do a Q&A. So if you're interested, ask me anything down below in the comments. Just maybe put Q&A in front so I know it's a question for the Q&A, and I'll answer it in tomorrow's episode.